Have you ever tried making changes around your money, but no matter what you do, you keep going back to the same old patterns? Well, today I'm speaking to the world's leading expert in financial psychology on how to create a truly rich mindset. Welcome back to the You Potential Podcast. I'm your host, Sean Maslick. Today, I'm joined by Dr. Brad Klontz, who pioneered the field of financial psychology over 2 decades ago. He's authored 9 books, including his latest, Start Thinking Rich. He's a professor, researcher whose work has been published in major academic journals and viewed by over 150 million people across social media platforms. Dr. Klontz is the leading voice when it comes to the psychology of money. Today, we're exploring what is financial psychology. What is the difference between being in poverty and having a poor mindset? How can we create healthy relationships with money? And what are the top mindsets that all self-made millionaires share? Plus, Brad talks about his own story of creating a rich mindset because he doesn't just talk the talk, he walks the walk. Let's go. Dr. Brad Klontz, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, Sean.
I'm excited to have a chat with you, another chat with you, this time, maybe a little different than our previous conversations, but I'm excited for our listeners to hear about the way you think about money. And somewhere I thought we could start was, what did picking up a bow and arrow for the first time in many years teach you about scarcity and fear?
You saw my social media post, apparently.
Yeah, it worked.
So I grew up in Michigan. I spent many years in Hawaii. And when I went over there, I just got rid of all my stuff. And so I decided to actually revisit some things that I really enjoyed in my youth. And one of those things was archery. And so literally a few days ago, I went up into the hills near my house, up in the mountains, and to an archery range, and I was just there by myself, and I was shooting, and I was having this weird experience where I was like, I felt this incredible sense of abundance. And hey, look, that's a great mindset to have. But this was very specific to the fact that I had 20 arrows in my quiver. And I didn't really make this connection at all. I just felt this sense of abundance, and I started to reflect on it, and I nailed it down to that. I had 20 brand new, high-quality arrows in my quiver. And I was sitting with that for a while and thinking about it. And one of the great things about creating content is you got to have like I got to create some content today. It's actually a fabulous like forced journaling exercise. And so I sat and I thought, what is that about? You know, and I had these flashbacks to when I was a child, and I shot tons of archery as a kid, just in the woods by myself. And I remembered I had 4 arrows, and I have dreams about this still too, about what it would be like to go to the store and to be able to buy a bunch of arrows and broadheads and equipment. I have dreams about this that continue, that it's sort of, I'm not really conscious of, but they just pop into my head. And I realized that what had come back for me, and I think part of the reason it was so vivid is I had taken this hiatus for 20 years or more. And I think I'm just sort of reminded of, I think a lot of this is very subtle, but this was very dramatic since I had stopped doing this thing and then I had just started it up day one. And I had 4 arrows, and 3 of them were bent, Sean, because I had used them so much. And I remember that I got good at shooting these bent arrows and hitting the target because I knew which way they were bent, and I would compensate for it in my aim. And I had one good arrow that I would use for hunting, and I protected that. It was so valuable to me. And anyway, I was just sort of reminded of this sense of abundance. And then I started to think, like, what is rich? And you know, it's one of the titles of my book, and I think about it all the time. And for me, in that moment, I just had this sense of clarity. You know, for me, it wasn't about having a fancy car or a watch or anything like that. For me, it was having a bunch of arrows in my quiver and this sense of abundance. And it was such a great feeling, and also a great reminder I was also felt abundant that I could, in the middle of the day, go shoot some archery, and while I was out there, I wasn't worried about, paying my rent, my mortgage. I didn't have all this financial stress and anxiety, and it was sort of a sense of freedom. And so it's sort of this profound experience of just going and shooting at some archery targets, but it really brought me back to a flashback of my entire life around growing up, not having much, and what that felt like, and feeling like I was missing out, and just sort of craving some of these tools that would help me enjoy my life. Frankly, it's not like I would be bragging about my arrows, and showing them off. I might now, though, on Instagram, if I was a kid, hey, check out my arrow. It's totally straight, Sean.
Thanks for sharing that, Brad. And there's so many interesting parts to your question or your answer that actually made me reflect. This is about you. However, as you're talking, before we got on, despite I've talked to you maybe 3 or 4 times on podcasts before, this one in particular, I felt this sense of abundance and this sense of richness from a different way than I ever felt before. And it's because I've been following your work for 8, 10 years. And when I read that post, this scarcity and fear, that's how I always thought about money. And it wasn't really until I started reading your work and taking your course that I started to rethink money and the fear and scarcity that I had around money. And it feels, I just guess I'm grateful that we get to have another conversation like this. And I feel totally different than even our first one. So while I don't have my own arrows specifically, I have my own versions of arrows that your work has helped me work through. So thank you.
Thank you.
Mine are street hockey sticks, but anyhow. So, Brad, you are known for many things. Social media has been up there as of late. But I want to start with just financial psychology. This is something that you were at the forefront. You're one of the creators of this field at a time when most people are looking at compound interest and other financial calculations, which are important. You started talking about financial psychology or the psychology of money, 2 decades ago. For those listening, can you answer this complex question in a simple, articulate way of what is financial psychology and why it matters?
Oh, I need to go back and, get an elevator speech around what is financial psychology.
Yeah.
And, because it is my area of expertise, but I don't even know how to explain it to you. But I think it's an exploration of why we do what we do when it comes to money. That's essentially what it is. And what I noticed very early is that everyone seems to know what they should be doing. Now, there are certainly knowledge gaps, like what type of investment should I get, or what type of investment vehicle, and those are very, very important. But that's not where people are stuck. And what I have found is that people are stuck at the level of not saving enough for the future. That's number one. And number two, spending more than they make. And that is the average American right now, by the way, by every survey. And I've yet to find somebody who doesn't know better. And so I'm a huge fan of financial literacy and teaching people, but I feel like that's really not the issue. I feel like the issue is some of the work that needs to be done so that people can actually just do what they already know they should be doing. And to me, that's sort of the essence of financial psychology. It's trying to understand why we do what we do when it comes to money. And then the second part for me has been trying to figure out how to get people to take action in doing those things. And there's a lot in between those two areas, but it's sort of closing that gap, I think, from what I know I should be doing and what I'm actually doing that may not be in my best interest. And quite frankly, too, when a lot of people are dealing with financial stress and their behaviors aren't in line with what's good for financial health in sort of an objective point of view, it's also out of alignment with their deepest core values too. And so it's not just like an expert on the outside saying, oh, you're doing that wrong. It's an internal conflict people have, because for most people, like, they want to have financial freedom. They want to have less financial stress. They have very clear and passionate financial goals that really matter to them around making a better life for themselves, their family, their kids, their community. So this is something that's a really value to them, but they're living out of integrity with that value. And I think it creates suffering, an internal sense of suffering. And for me anyway, that has been what my, I would say, professional life mission has been, is trying to understand what that means. Because I needed to understand my own financial psychology. It's sort of funny, like, how do you become an expert in something? Well, what you do is get really passionate about something, and then you spend time trying to find other experts who will teach you, and then you realize there aren't any. And in that moment, you are probably the world's leading expert. And so that's sort of how I stumbled into it, was just trying to figure out my own money psychology.
Yeah, but you had this level of curiosity because you probably weren't the only one wrestling with these thoughts. What was pulling you towards, like, hey, I got to research this. I got to start creating this field way back. Was it early 2000s, right?
It was. Yep. It was early 2000s. I remember that because I'm a terrible historian on dates, but I remember that the first article we ever had written about our work was 2002. And I went from nothing to Wall Street Journal. So that's how fast it happened. So I was like, whoa, there's a lot I had to learn along the way. But it was because nobody was really doing this work. And it's not because I'm brilliant. It's because psychologists weren't doing the work. And I was a psychologist at that point. And so it was really me trying to sort out why I made terrible financial mistakes, which I'm happy to talk about. And I did what I was trained to do as a psychologist, which is like, when you want to find out about something in terms of psychology, you do a lit review. And so that's literally what I did. I was like, oh my God, why would a reasonably intelligent person, reasonably intelligent, do something so stupid with his money? It's like, oh my gosh, why would I do that? And I just immediately went and started to do lit reviews to try to find psychologists who had done studies on this, because my plan was to do this, like I'd done in every other area that I was screwing up in my life, try to figure out what psychology has shown to be true about it, and then give me the roadmap on what I need to do to change so that I can be better. And if I had found that, I wouldn't have written any of these books. I wouldn't have done any of these studies. I wasn't setting out to do that, but it was actually just driven by me trying to search for the answers for myself, and I couldn't find any. And so that's what led me to start becoming even more curious. First of all, part of the curiosity is like, why hasn't psychology done anything related to this? I mean, because ironically, it was the psychologists who were saying that money is the biggest source of stress in people's lives. Number one. And at that point, and it's still true now, is like 3 out of 4 Americans, number one source of stress. And I was sort of going like, aren't we like one of the richest countries in the world or whatever? And isn't the quality of life super high? And when you think of historical perspectives, aren't we living in a time of absolute abundance when you look at history? And so it's like, why are 3 out of 4 people like, this is the biggest stress in their life? So number one. Number two, aren't psychologists supposed to help people with stress? Like, I mean, those two things weren't adding up for me. And so then I got curious about what do mental health and helpers. And if you're listening to this now and you're a helper, you're a teacher, you create beautiful things in the world, you're an artist, you help people with their emotions. What I have found is that group of people tend to have very personally destructive and limiting beliefs around money. And I did studies on it. So that was another area of curiosity I had.
Why? Why do we have these destructive thoughts?
So I look at it from 2 different lenses. So the first is, and maybe listeners have heard of behavioral finance. And if you haven't, it's a really fabulous topic. And really what it looks at is, how do humans approach the world? And it looks at the cognitive biases we have, the way that we make sense of things, our perceptions, our instincts. And what studies have found is, and Investig is a perfect example where this plays out, is that we are wired to survive in an environment that is short-term focused, survival focused, And if the best way I like to think about it is your relationship with money is driven by two different things. The first one is what I'm talking about, your natural biological wiring, and thinking about how we have spent 99% of our time on this planet. And think about that brain and what that brain had to do to survive and thrive. It occurred within a hunter-gatherer community of about 100 to 150 closely related people. And if you think about yourself in that situation and what would be adaptive for your survival, it really makes sense of a lot of decisions around money. So the first is the herd instinct. So stock market starts crashing. What is your instinct? What do you want to do? You want to panic sell. Of course you do. This is how you're wired. There's a really sexy investment opportunity here. Everyone's talking about it. Crypto is sort of the latest one. I'm not saying it's sexy. I'm just saying we saw this happen. Massive run to that, right? And you think about why that would happen. Well, just imagine sitting at a fire in your hunter-gatherer community, out in the wilderness. Everyone stands up and runs west, and you're sitting there eating your turkey leg. What are you going to do? Well, I'll tell you what your ancestors did. They got up and they ran west, because the ancestors who just sat there and looked around, they're the ones who got picked off by whatever was coming. And so just one of many examples of how we're just naturally wired to do it wrong. So that's one area. The second area is, okay, so that one says we're all screwed up when it comes to money. We have a brain focused on short-term survival, not planning for the future. I mean, that's a luxury in that type of environment. You couldn't even save anything. Like, you couldn't even save food. It would spoil. So real short-term survival. There's food. Oh my gosh, eat as much as you can. This is why we struggle with weight, because we're wired to eat as much as we can. And what? Of the fattiest, saltiest, most caloric food. That's how your ancestors survived the next 7 days when there was no food. So this mindset of like, oh, I'm just going to eat a little bit now, and eat some later, those people died. Okay. So you have that. And then the second piece, which has really been the bulk of my research, which nothing had ever really been done on this, which to me was sort of crazy at the time, just trying to figure out my own relationship with money, is like, okay, got it. We're all screwed up when it comes to money. But what about you specifically, Sean? Your unique mindset around money. And so a lot of my research has been around those inherited beliefs that we have gotten as individuals from our parents, from our neighborhood, from our mentors, from our culture, from our religion. So they come from all these different areas. But that is a really fabulous exploration if you really want to understand why you've struggled with money, why you're not at total peace with money, why you haven't achieved your financial goals in the way you'd like to. I think there's so much value in exploring both of those, but especially how you're uniquely wired.
Oh, thank you. It's really making me think of, I hear you talk about a lot of like agency, like taking the power to control what I can make change of. My last guest, Dr. Michael Steger, talked about finding meaning in life. And there's this meaning of life and meaning in life. And he said, maybe forget about meaning of life, what the grand plan of this whole thing is. If you look at the meaning in life, you can make change. You have that agency to make the decisions that are going to make you feel more meaningful. Seems the exact same as when we look at our own psychology of money. We can then start, with your courses, I was naming my relationship with money. I was recognizing that we did that one exercise in your class where we had to write a letter to our ancestors and excavate like how they thought about money. I'm not saying this just because you're on the episode. It was life-changing to take that control back and see, this is why I think, feel, and do what I do with money. So my question is, I've heard people talk a lot about change. If we want to change specifically our relationship with money, I've heard people say like, yeah, you don't really need to go in the past to make big, meaningful change. I've heard people say, yeah, we need to excavate the past, understand why we think, feel, and do what we do, in this case, money. I think I know your stance, but I'm curious here because I've been hearing different versions, and I know there's always many ways to do something. But from your lens, specifically around a relationship with money, if the goal is to have a long-term meaningful change, do we need to go in the past to explore these things that you just brought up?
Well, first of all, I love your observation that, and by the way, here's a little tip for viewers. If you want to be really famous on something, just take a hard stance against something else and say, you should never do that. That's absolutely wrong. That's how most famous psychologists develop their fields of study, is by taking an extreme position. So there, you're welcome. I'll catch you on social media. I feel like, so I do get this. I've thought about this a lot, because I'm here selling this concept, not really selling it, but I'm promoting this concept of financial psychology. And my stance is, if your relationship with money is giving you what you want, and when you think about your future goals, you're very confident that what you're doing right now is going to lead to you achieving those, I don't think any exploration is necessary. So let me start with that. If everything's going great, you don't need to do anything. Now, I think about that when it comes to health too. And it's also a good idea to go get a checkup every now and then. So if every now and then you would sit back and sort of reflect, that's one way to do it. Or number two, maybe get a second opinion, maybe talk to a financial advisor. I think it's so valuable to sit down with somebody who's an objective third party and say, okay, so this is what I'm doing. Here are my goals. What do you think? Based on your expertise, based on your experience with working with perhaps hundreds of other people similar to me, give me some external perspective around, am I on track? So by the way, I think that's a great idea in every relationship. Like I sat down with my son a couple months ago. I'm like, all right, so tell me, give me a report card on how I am as a father and what you think I need to do to improve. And it's so amazing. My 12-year-old was like, oh yeah. But I got some really valuable insight from that. So I think that's a great idea. Now, if you aren't in the category of feeling like you're mastering your plan, you're on track with all your goals, you're feeling great about your relationship with money, that's where I think some digging is a really good idea for you. It's a really good idea. If you found yourself making a big financial mistake, I think it's incredibly valuable and very important, actually, for you to dissect and analyze exactly how you ended up there, with a focus, as you mentioned, Sean, on what we would call internal locus of control. So what you want to avoid is finding and casting blame on everyone else. So let me give you a quick example. And by the way, everyone wants to do this. It just feels so great to blame other people. Great. Oh, I love it. So for example, if you think of the last fight you had with someone you love, and so I'll use the example of me and my wife. Oh, it's very clear to me how she has created this situation, Sean. Like, I mean, I'm a good guy. I'm just doing my thing, and I'm a great guy. And let me give you a list of all the things that make me great, and that she should have deep appreciation for, that she takes for granted, by the way, too, Sean. She doesn't tell me how great I am in all these areas every single day. It's very annoying. And so it's real easy for me, and I'd love to just pin it all on her. The forensic analysis that you need to do in your own life when you make a financial mistake is, what is your role in it? Because all the research that psychology has done, and the research I've done very specifically on ultra high net worth individuals, middle class, low income, this has been one of the areas of study that I've done around their psychology, because I wanted to equip myself, my kids, with a wealth mindset, with a rich mindset, and also teach as many people as possible. So that's what I'm out doing on social media. That internal locus control is so critically important. So it's like, okay, and I'll give you another example too. Let's say you had a business partner who stole from you, okay, and now your business is gone. Oh my gosh, and I love this one because clearly this person stole from you. It's not your fault. You got to be really careful about that, and I'm not here to blame the victim, but you could say, if that's the way you want to think about it, fine. But what I want you to do so that you're not a victim next time is think, okay, all right, he did that, obviously wrong, perhaps even criminal, but what role, and this is, by the way, is so incredibly valuable, and don't let yourself off the hook, because this is how you transform your life. What red flags were there that I missed? Oh, And by the way, this is such a difficult, emotionally challenging exercise that most people won't do it. And they'll just end up repeating mistakes over and over and over. I've been into it so long, and seeing how successful people do this, like it's like crack to me almost, Sean. Like I am desperate to blame myself for absolutely everything I can. Because I find it to be incredibly empowering. Because if it's all my wife's fault, I'm powerless. I'm a powerless victim, you know. What I want to do is find out, you know, that it's actually my fault, you know, because therein lies my power to transform my life. So I'm a huge fan of looking for that, zeroing in on it, focusing on it in as many areas as I possibly can in my life.
I appreciate the focus on this internal locus of control, and having listened and done so much of your work, I've really adopted that, and it changed a lot, similar to what you're talking about. I want to ask a question about internal locus of control here, but before that, I'm going to park it. I got a note. You mentioned you're teaching your kids about a rich mindset. I don't want you to gloss over that, because you have a very evolved, I would say, definition or stance on what a rich mindset is. Can you share that? I don't want people to just gloss over and be like rich, like Scrooge rich.
Yes. Well, I use the word rich mindset because in the studies I've done, and reading other people's studies too, and all of that student stuff that I still do myself, there are very clear beliefs and a psychological makeup of people, and the ones I like to focus on are self-made millionaires, essentially. But by the way, I'm interested in anyone who's successful in anything, even if it's not financially related at all. If it's something that I want to be successful in, I'm very interested in studying how they think about things. And growing up lower income, which is where I come from, that's a mystery to me. Like, how do those people think? And I was very curious about it as a child, because I saw that in my family, we didn't have money, and everyone seemed to work really, really hard. You know, I'm talking like 100 hours a week. So I immediately thought, well, maybe it's related to hard work. It's not the only thing, though. Clearly, I grew up in a family with people who were really generous and loving. And so I'm like, well, and for a while I thought, I had this belief that, oh, well, rich people must be selfish and mean. Yes, that's it. And by the way, that made me immediately feel better about being broke. You know, it's like, all right, great. And in the research I've done, we've called that money avoidance. And these are very specific beliefs. Rich people are greedy. Money corrupts. There's virtue in having less money. Well, big surprise. Those beliefs are associated with lower income, lower net worth, and a bunch of self-destructive financial behaviors. So this is where you have to be careful. This is why it's really valuable to sort of search for these beliefs. And so when I think of a rich mindset, I just think essentially of the psychology and habits and behaviors of people who are able to climb the socioeconomic ladder.
The habits that are going to increase my bank account. But again, this mindset on how we think about money and our relationship with money.
Yeah, for me, it's the psychology. It's like it's like, how are you wired, and how are you looking at the world, and how are you looking at failure? And, you know, how are you looking at creating a life that you want to have in the future? How do you deal with adversity? For example, the average millionaire has had about approximately, it's a statistic, right? But it's about 3 major financial failures in their life. Now, that's interesting, and that's curious. The average non-millionaire has had less than 1 on average. And I'm just left with, like, so what does that mean? You know, assuming that people start out at a similar place, how do some people go on to become financially successful and other people stay stuck? And that's always been something very curious to me. And it has to do with internal locus of control. It has to do with certain money scripts. It has to do with a growth mindset. You know, are you looking at yourself as fixed? You know, I'm poor. I'm always going to be poor. Or are you looking at things like, you know, broke is a temporary state. I think that's a much better way of looking at it. You know, broke means you have no money. I didn't have money at one point. I may not have money in the future. That's not who you are, though, you know. But if you have a poor mindset, if you have beliefs that are associated with being fixed, you know, like I'm poor, I'm bad with money, I'm just bad with money. Oh, that's a terrible thing to tell yourself. You're not just bad with money. You know, maybe you're not good with it right now. You know, I think it's better to say I have a lot to learn about money. Like just that simple little reframes like that can radically change your life. And so part of it is capturing the language and being aware of what you're saying to yourself around money, because so much of this occurs in our subconscious and we inherited so much of this. That's the fascinating thing that you mentioned too with the exercise of writing a letter to your ancestors. So much value in sitting down with your parents, asking questions about what it was like for them growing up around money, how they felt about it, how they felt about their socioeconomic class, and then getting insight into your grandparents and great-grandparents. And for me, it was that process that led to an instant de-shaming that I felt. I got the joy of blaming my parents a little bit too, which is always a little bit fun. But I immediately de-shamed. And I'm like, well, of course I was a bonehead when it came to money. Of course I got into trouble. Of course I did these dumb things. I inherited these beliefs and came from a family that didn't know any better. You know, they were stuck in their own mindset, in their own money scripts. There's so much value in dissecting that and uncovering it.
That letter, as you mentioned, I just felt this visceral reaction in a good way back to the letter. And I was always considered cheap, and like cheap to the level where I would buy things on sale because they're on sale and they were too big, too small, not useful, and I have to rebuy them. Like I'd end up spending more money, but it felt better to buy them on sale. And I couldn't really come to understand why it's so cheap. My wife was just bumping her head on the wall, being like, why do you think like this? And it was through that letter that I talked with my dad, and I found out that his great-grandfather immigrated from Ukraine, and they promised farmland in this province of Alberta. So they make the big long journey. They get here, and it's not farmland; it's forest. And you know they give up everything.
Potential farmland.
Potential farmland.
Oh no!
And they have to make it farmable. And there's distrust in the authorities now. There's distrust in the systems. So, you know, they eventually start making money, and it's like, I got to hold on to that money at all costs because I don't trust this system. And it really occurred to me, it's just like, wow, that is so powerful how that just trickles down from generation to generation. And it just makes sense. And I felt like it really gave me this idea to remove the shame, like you're saying, and give me this internal locus of control to be like, I can control that now. This is why it's happening. So I have a hard time going back to my question. I do have a hard time. Here's my strong stance to get on social media, as you said. I have a hard time thinking that you can get all this awareness about yourself without cultivating or excavating the past. And I say that also because I felt like everything was fine. I only took your course because I want to be smarter and like prop up my credentials. That's why I took the course at first.
And by the way, we respect you so much more now that you have those credentials.
Yeah, I know. But what it like, and I say that because like, I thought everything was fine. So
yeah,
if I didn't do that, I would have just kept going on my way. But it just, back to your rich mindset, it's doing this work has helped me create a deeper and more wealthy, rich mindset.
I love it. I share that curiosity that you've perhaps not have always had, but you have now, and I didn't always have it, but that I'm constantly looking to upgrade my mentality is probably the best way I can say it. And so, for example, like I'm always looking for, is there a better way to look at this? You know, is there a better way to see this? And so I'm fascinated by people who seem to be having a different experience than I'm having that looks attractive. For example, I'm thinking about some of the dark moments in parenting of young, you know, colicky babies and just like, oh my gosh, like, and there's a lot of intense suffering that can happen in that. And if anyone here is a parent, you know exactly what I'm talking about, unless you're in denial. Um, but like, I would be hungry for, how do people reframe this so that I can get more joy out of this short period of time in my life where there's some suffering and some benefit? How can I get benefit out of this? So I'm always looking for that. And so when it comes to money, you know, one of my goals was to become wealthy. And, you know, because chapter 1 in my book, Start Thinking Rich, it's 21 harsh truths is what we focus on. And chapter 1 is being poor sucks. Okay. And so, you know, growing up, seeing that I can't, you know, with insecurity and fear and not having enough money to eat sometimes when when I got into college. And it's like, being poor sucks. It really does suck. And that's why I am a shameless promoter of people becoming wealthy. I think everyone should do it. And not only that, I think everyone can do it. And you might say to me, oh, give me a break. What about minimum wage workers? Well, I worked for 20 years in Hawaii in a low-income high school. And I ran so many different, you know, whiteboard analyses for kids around how you can work in a fast food restaurant for your entire life and retire a millionaire.
Mm-hmm.
And so I don't buy it, to be honest.
Mm-hmm.
And when I say I don't buy it, it's like, I'm very willing to listen to you give me all of your excuses. Let me rephrase that. All of your powerful reasons
Mm-hmm.
for why this is going to be challenging. But there's probably nothing you could say to me that's going to make me just give up on you as a lost cause. It's probably not going to happen unless you told me, Brad, you know, Dr. Brad, here's the deal. I just don't want to do that.
Mm-hmm.
I don't want to do that stuff. And like, I can respect that. I can respect your choice. If that's your decision, I utterly respect it. I'll love you. I can even admire you for taking what I think is such a bold position. You're not going to sell me on the idea that it's impossible for you. I refuse to believe it.
The way you position your messaging always speaks to me and the millions of people who follow you online. And I think it's because you've done the work. You know, like, doing the work we've kind of been dancing around this. It's hard. You know, it's easier to come up with excuses, or perhaps we don't even realize they're excuses like we're talking about. But doing the work is hard. And you know, you share a lot about your story growing up in poverty, as you just mentioned here. You've experienced what that feels like. You've done the research. And now, you know what? As a result, you've become wealthy. And sometimes I see online people who, you know, they made wonderful decisions and became wealthy, and it's great. And I hear them talking about how, like, oh, you just, you know, it's not about the money. Money doesn't make you happy. And it's like, once they like sold the company for $50 million, they're saying this now. I find your message resonates so much is because you've been saying this for 20 plus years, and you've really researched, studied, the world leading expert at this, and you have this way to connect with people. So this is a long queuing up question. Is during this time, though, I'm sure, even though you're author of 8 wonderful books, world leading expert, I'm sure your mindset wasn't always where it is today. Kind of like the doctor who smokes.
Yeah.
At what point did your mindset really change? And you're like, I accept that I don't have this scarcity and fear that we opened up with.
That's such an interesting perspective question. And it makes some assumptions, Sean. Like, when you say I've done the work, I feel like I hope I'm doing the work. Like, actually, when you said that, I'm like, oh my God, I hope I'm not thinking that I'm there. That's scary to me.
I should have used ing, doing the work still. But you did the work to get where you are.
Absolutely. No, I accept that. But I also am, what I noticed too is it's an approach. You know, like, a rich mindset is sort of an approach to life. It's not just you had this mindset and now you're rich. It's like, now you're done with it. Like for example, like a poor mindset is, what I've noticed, is more focused on immediate shiny things, you know? Oh, this pen, once I get this pen, I crave this pen. And so Dr. Brad, sure. Okay. So you're telling me to save and invest a percentage and wait, but when can I get the pen? Like, when can I get it? Because I really want that. And that's okay. It's okay that you want this pen. But what I worry about is you think this pen is going to somehow change your experience in any sort of lasting way. That's a poor mindset, because it's not going to. And what you're going to do is just go to the next thing and the next thing and the next thing, and then you're not going to have any net worth built up. So I feel like it's an approach to life. And when you ask me the question, I'm like, when did I get this approach to life? I feel like I got it pretty early on. Now, the challenge is that I'm constantly uncovering what I would say are blind spots, constantly uncovering them. It's like, I feel like I get a handle on this, and then it's like, oh, there's this other area. Whoa. So I'm constantly looking for those. And so I think that's the approach to life. But I remember having this approach very early on in my life. And I remember one particular incident. I remember was going to one of my friend's houses, and it was middle school. So it was probably like 6th grade. So I'm probably 12. And I went to his house, and I'm like, oh my God, this kid lives in a mansion. And this had been a friend of mine I had known from school. I'm like, he's so rich. Oh, and I was just sort of blown away by this incredibly big house he had. And he had 2 bathrooms in the house, Sean. And I was like, 2 bathrooms? Like, oh my God, what would that be like? So I was in my mom remarried. So I had a stepdad, a couple stepbrothers. So at various points in and out of the house and everything. So at various points, we have 6 people in a house with 1 bathroom. And that could be kind of rough, especially during flu season. And it's like, so I just thought, like, oh my God, like, what did I think rich was? It's like a house with 2 bathrooms. Like, that's rich. Let's talk about practical quality of life, Yeah. And, in retrospect, this guy was middle class. Okay. But for me, I was like, oh my God. So, but here's the point. I recognized it. I looked at his dad and I said, I think it's no different than my family. Hardworking, nice guy. I remember at dinner, though, I was like, oh, I'm going to get to the bottom of this. And so literally at dinner, I'm having dinner with my friend, his mom, and the entire dinner, I am doing a clinical interview of this father at age 12 to try to figure out how he got this house. How did he get 2 bathrooms? And I didn't ask him that. I was like, oh, so what do you do? What do you do for a living? Oh, I got it. How'd you get into that? I mean, at age 12, all right, so here is the key. And this one belief unlocks all doors, I think. And it's this: if they can do it, I can do it. And it's such a critical belief that if you don't have it, to me, it's priority 1 is to get it. Okay. Now, and let me say this. I have a story. I come from a certain background. My co-author for Start Thinking Rich, son of Mexican immigrants. So he's got a story, and he's got obstacles. And, where I grew up, I have obstacles. There may be somebody who looks at me and says, and with total valid too, yeah, but you're a male, and males have certain unearned privileges in our society and in our world. And I'm like, you're right. But not only that, I'm probably not aware of them, because I just think you just got to do X, Y, and Z and everything's fine. Meanwhile, a woman may walk into a particular situation and catch all these biases and these obstacles. And I am no way minimizing that. And you could say the same thing about sexual orientation or religious background, ethnicity. Whether you're an immigrant to a new place or whether your parents were born there, etc. There's all these lists of things that are extra obstacles. And so the challenge, though, is for you, if you're listening to me, listening to someone else, and you're like, yeah, whatever. If he could do it, I can do it. That doesn't work for me because of X, Y, and Z, because of demographics or my background or whatever. Find somebody who takes that away. So find somebody who's more like you in that particular area. Find somebody who's same background, same ethnicity, same, gender. What you need to do is find somebody where you can say, well, if they can do it, I can do it. Because that mindset shift right there will change your life. Because and it's so weird how the world works in the universe. And I don't know if it's metaphysical. I'm a scientist. But what's so strange is that when you open your mind that it's possible, it's like you will start to notice things that you didn't notice previously. And my guess is those things have always been around. You just weren't ready for it. You weren't looking for it. And so if you can make that adjustment, if they can do it, I can do it, it'll radically transform your life. And you'll start to see opportunities, avenues, mentors that may have been always around. Maybe you'll do a Google search for them. That's what's amazing now. But it'll change your life.
And it's so interesting. The opposite can be the destructive behaviors we were talking about earlier. You'll find the things if you look for them on the opposite end.
Absolutely. And not only that, you'll find people who make a living as peddlers of powerlessness. And it's one of the most annoying things that I see online. It makes me really, really mad. And it usually comes from a good place. It's like somebody who's really, really passionate about trying to change the system. And by the way, I'm system agnostic. Like, obviously, I'm against any system that is unfair, of course. My focus, though, is I don't feel like, and maybe this is a mindset that I could change. I don't feel like I've got the power to change the system today. But what I do believe is that I can help myself and others learn the game and learn how to win the game. But there are people who make a living by telling you that there's nothing you can do about it. And so vote for me. I'll help you. You need me to do it. You can't do it. And sometimes people do that out of their own sense of guilt for unearned privilege. They grew up rich. And then I don't know, some people are doing it for nefarious reasons, I think, for their own benefit. So that's something that really annoys me, is people selling powerlessness. Don't buy it.
It's very disempowering and makes me think, and I don't know, but it could be driven from the scarcity and fear mentality. You talked about you're constantly upgrading, and I'm wondering this because it's a personal wrestling match I have. I also feel like I want to upgrade, but yet my kids are growing older. My son's 9 now, which blows me away that he's already halfway to 20. I know that's not quite 20, but around it. How do you balance this constantly upgrading versus having some presence and leaving enough space to just be someone who could go do archery in the afternoon and not just be constantly driven by this desire to upgrade, this hustle culture that sometimes is propped up on social media?
That's interesting. I feel like the upgrading is one of the easier things that I do. It doesn't take a lot of effort, frankly. It takes an open mind, so every conversation I have with someone, I'm like, is there something in here that I can look at things in a different way? And I'm constantly curious about that. So how do you look at things? How do you look at parenting? Even what you said about your son, I'm like, oh yeah, that's right. Oh my gosh, yes, my kids are that. I mean, you've already helped me just become more conscious of something that I value. And it's this, and so what I just heard from you, and I've heard it before, but I take every opportunity, is like, I am going to be more present with my kids today because of what you said. And so that's the type of thing that I'm talking about. Because we forget about these things. We do. They come into our consciousness and out of our consciousness. So I'm always trying to find those things that I can upgrade immediately, and use and as fuel to help me dive deeper into what matters most to me. And in terms of the hustle culture thing, I don't know. I've put a lot of time and energy into lifestyle design, and I encourage other people to do the same. So part of your goal is, part of what I think rich, for me, what rich is freedom. So rich for me is owning the most precious resource. It's not gold. It's not Bitcoin, whatever. It's time. It's time. And so that, for me, I've spent the last 20 years with the goal of trying to own more and more of my time. That was my primary financial goal.
So, yeah, time. I mean, these are, how do we spend our time, energy, and resources? Big questions. I'm curious about this time here. Like, we have these finite moments. This is a moment. How do you go about spending your time or your moments right now? Like, how do you think about that?
Well, on a good day, I think about it. All right, so that's first one. So I think the first mindset shift is to try to think about it. Like, how are you spending your time? And we talk about upgrading. So one of my challenges, and it's an ongoing challenge, is looking at, I need to be working, which is a wild sort of concept. Like, what do you mean you need to be working? What does that mean? And so I have to do little mental tricks, because one of my values is to spend time with my family. And one of the ways to do that is to live a long, healthy life. If you live a short, unhealthy life, you are spending less time with your family. You're going to spend less time with them. You're going to, for me also, I feel like I really enjoy my role as a provider and caretaker. And so that's part of what I love to do with my family too. And so how do I accentuate my ability to caretake and provide? Well, a focus on health is pretty important. And what's a challenge for me though has been like, oh, well, I can't stop working and go work out. Working out is like, that's a non-revenue generating activity. This is what's happening in my subconscious. And literally my reframe is like, well, actually, I'll make a lot more money, which is one of the goals, right? And I'll put my family in a better position and have blah, 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 if I can work longer. So I will find little mental tricks like that, even though I know it's a trick, that really are useful for me.
I guess it's noticing. What I'm hearing is you're noticing that thought and then using a trick to a trick or a motivation, a reframe to do something that is going to be good for you, as opposed to this like instinctual habit or reaction that you explained earlier from our ancestral days that were like, no, can't do that. Survival of the fittest, make more money.
Yep. And I'll, just real briefly, I traced it back to my grandfather's father. And so my grandfather's father was a lazy, good for nothing. I mean, that's the family story. And I don't doubt it. I don't know the guy, but I assume it's possible. My grandfather spent his entire life trying to make up for that by becoming an absolute workaholic. My father spent his entire life feeling like he wasn't working hard enough compared to his dad. I heard that story, changed my life, because my wife heard the story at the same time. She was my fiance at the time. She's like, "Oh my God, that's you!" And I'm like, "Holy crap! You've got to be kidding me!" So I have all this guilt about work, and I'm a workaholic. And by the way, there's nothing wrong with working a lot. It's just I was neglecting other things. And I didn't have kids at the time, but one of my goals was to not be a workaholic when I had kids. And I was like, you've got to be kidding me. So what is driving so much of my behavior on a day-to-day basis is because my grandfather was trying to make up for my lazy great-grandfather. That's ridiculous. Like, once you see it, first of all, it just makes sense. It's like, well, no wonder I would do it. And then number two, that's ridiculous. And so that was what's so helpful for me around that is like, I still have the drive. I'll still have the automatic thought, oh no, you need to be working. And I'll be like, whoa. Let's just remember where this comes from.
Even more of a reason to look at the past, because without that knowledge, you might not be able to have that reframe or ability to go back and forth between your thoughts. You mentioned about spending more time with your kids. So going back to your son's opportunity to give you a 360-degree feedback report, did he say anything about not spending enough time, may I ask?
He did not.
There you go.
Yeah, that wasn't on the list. He has an abundance of time with his father. So he had other complaints,
Yeah.
which is good. And like one of them is like, I don't feel like you listen to me, and it's usually when, in my perspective, he's just giving me some bullshit excuse because I told him to do something. But I realized, well, okay, whoa, slow down. Like, even if I'm right, I want my son to have the experience that his dad really listens to him.
Yeah.
Because that's the experience I wish I would have had as a kid. And so it changed that for me, because I realized in my mind, I'm like, yeah, just do what I told you. I don't want to hear that crap. And then I'm like, whoa, no, that's not the experience I want to be giving him. So, it's incredibly valuable. And by the way, I encourage people to do it with their spouses too. Like, why not? Hey, I love you, and I just want to take a moment. If there's any feedback you can give me on how I can be a better partner to you, what is the harm in that? It's a beautiful gift.
I mean, can you imagine the reaction to your spouse if you say that? They're like, what? Oh, wow. Instant connection.
Yeah. Like, and it may be like, well, I had a list of complaints, but they're all gone right now since you just asked me that question.
When you said that about your son, though, geez, that spoke to me. Like, how often in the busyness do we say, no, empty the dishwasher. I asked you to do that. Just do it. But they have a little voice to be heard. I look at the time here. You mentioned your father and your great-grandfather and about yourself living a long life. Through some of the programs that you and your dad offer, you guys have talked about mortality and what it could teach us. You recently shared a post online about the passing of your uncle, and your father had a severe illness, not so long ago. Can you share how these deeply personal experiences has helped you reflect more, and the way you're thinking about this post that you wrote about? I think it was called To a Life Well Lived.
Yeah. So one of a terrible experience that I had growing up was the loss of my brother at around age 14. And he took his own life. So I had the experience of getting a phone call and just hearing that someone as close to you as possible is gone. And I was probably 11 when that happened. And it's like a flashbulb moment. I remember exactly where I was. I remember everything. And I remember everything that happened after that. And the terrible thing about experiencing trauma, and I had other pretty significant traumas growing up, and it's like, it's terrible having to experience that. The gift, I guess, and I use that word hesitantly, but it truly is a gift, is that it's been in my conscious awareness every day since, that at any moment, it could be me. Nobody really worries about that. Or it could be somebody I love more than anything will be gone. And so it's and I also think about, I know this to be true for some people from Native communities that I know, and one of the mantras for this one particular individual I know has been sort of waking up every day and saying, hey, looking around, hey, today would be a good day to die. Today's a good day. It's like, I think for many of our ancestors, it was like life or death was a day-to-day thing. And I feel like it's a luxury if you get to go for years without having to experience that, because you're going to experience it. It's a luxury if you have moments and windows where you're not experiencing it. But I feel like the gift is that is first of all, it's a terrible awareness, but it's a call to action too. So it's like, if anyone anyone you care about could be gone, not tomorrow, but like in 30 seconds with a phone call that tells you that, what do you need to say to them today? What are you going to wish you had said? And I just think that's a beautiful thing to be conscious of.
It really is. Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. It really highlights just how precious this life is. And we do take it for granted at times.
Yeah, absolutely. Yep. Anyway, what do you got to say after that story, Sean?
Well, my where
I
my
didn't know I
mind
was
is,
gonna. How'd you get me to tell you that story? But it's a good story though for me to. And again, I think about it all the time. And actually, one of my drivers to get into psychology was because I wanted to figure out why my brother did that. What was happening in the family system? How do I make sense of the drama and the trauma I grew up with? My parents split when I was 2, and so there was a lot of hardship that came following that. But it really did drive me to become a psychologist, frankly. And my specialty for 20 years was helping adolescents, make it through those types of really challenging moments in their lives.
Mm-hmm. The more I hear about your story, the more I continue to see, just from my observation, and maybe it's an assumption, how much meaning you derive from the work you're doing, from the personal experiences, and how your work and doing the work, continuing it, really showcases how much you care. And the impact it's having is millions of people that you're actually impacting. And, that all these life experiences really come together to help you articulate these really human experiences that we have around money. But ultimately it's this, spending our moments well so that we can say, I did it. I lived a good life. So thank you for all the work you're doing and sharing these stories, because life is precious. I know I just said that, but when you share stories like that, it really makes you reflect.
Yeah. And for me, that's the definition of rich. And, we will say, you'll hear people say money isn't everything. And of course it's not. Of course it's not. But it's a really important part,
Mm-hmm.
And because for me, as I mentioned, and I went down the wrong rabbit holes, like coming from not having much money. I got out of school. I had $100,000 in debt, and I bought like a luxury, watch to show. I don't even have one. To show people I've made it, and all that kind of stuff, all subconsciously, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, that's not it. That's not it. But what is it is a sense of safety, a sense of security, a sense of being able to provide for your kids. And by the way, too, like, think about it like this. It's if you're in your 50s or 60s and you're like, oh, I've failed at money and I'm not providing anything. No. Think about your kids, your grandkids, your great grandkids. You could do so much right now in terms of helping start to create that sense of generational wealth. And I'll tell you, like, my maternal grandfather lived in a trailer park, didn't have any money. But I'll tell you what, if he took me aside when I'm 7 or 8 and he's 80 and started to like tell me, hey, look, Brad, I didn't do this and I should have done it. And I wish I'd done it. And so what I want you to, and sent me on a mission. Are you kidding me? What an incredible gift
This sounds like a great new book.
It does, right? Take your failure in a particular area and make it meaningful. You could transform your family's life by developing a rich mindset, even if you're dead broke and you're 90 years old.
That segues perfect into your book. 8 books, but specifically this Start Thinking Rich book. I really appreciate this. There's so many concepts in here, but the mindset around thinking rich. And I like how you point out that, being poor is real and it sucks. As you mentioned, it can be temporary. Rich people, in terms of dollar cents, can have a poor mindset. So I really love this book. There's, 300 pages in here, 248. What would be the top? You might have already said it many times, but for listeners who need to go buy the book, but what would be the top reason to go buy this book specifically?
Well, I feel like, so I've written 9 books. Sean,
9? Okay,
come on.
sorry.
That's number 9. No. And it's I took a real confrontational tone on it. So which I've never done before. Like my other books would much more sort of therapeutic, you know.
Yeah.
But this one was sort of like, all right, so what if you were in the action phase of change? And so and you know all about that. The listener may not, but there's like 20% of people are like, just tell me what to do.
Mm-hmm.
You know, they're ready.
Yeah.
And so I wrote that book for those people, like who are like, just give it to me straight, doc. You know, and so each chapter, we call it a harsh truth, and it's like a slap in the head, you know, oh, smack. And then I would say that my intention anyway was the actual chapters are like a warm, loving hug. So I'm slapping you in the head, but I'm loving you, you know. And it's sort of like, all right, so if you were my client and you know, we shut the door, no one's listening, what would I tell you if I was going to give it to you straight? And that's kind of what this book is about. And so each one's a harsh truth. It's a mindset. But the one that I think is probably the most important, it's not even a chapter in the book, but it's sort of essentially the entire book, is that if they can do it, I can do it. To me, that is the most valuable mindset in any area of your life. Money, whatever, pickleball, whatever your goal is to have that awakening, because that will set you on the path to achieving whatever it is you want to achieve.
I got goosebumps hearing that. You know, I highlighted that in my notes here. And I think it lends itself or leads it to this internal locus of control. Like if I can do it, or if they can do it, I can do it. And then, yeah, you get that, I could do it. I have the ability to roll up my sleeves and do it. You mentioned I think that could be the title of my 10th book. There you go.
Nobody else take that title.
As you were mentioning, and you made me, the trans-theoretical model of change. As you said that, the action phase, I was like, wait, you know, the financial wisdom of Ebenezer Scrooge kind of was like the pre-contemplation, and your book thing kind of goes through all the phases. And now we're in the action phase. You've got the planning side down, like the financial planning book later on, like 3 or 4 down the road. Mm-hmm. Maybe you are unintentionally following that.
Maybe. I like it.
Brad, thank you so much for joining me. I always enjoy our conversations. My final question, which has been an adaptation of a question you asked me in your course, but it's evolved. Let's imagine you are now at end of life. It doesn't matter how old you are, and you're sitting on a front porch looking out at a view that gives you complete peace, ease, and contentment. You decide to bring out a notebook to write a letter, perhaps your final book. But the intent of this is to give this book letter to your children's children on what you learned was a key to have a meaningful life. What would be the message?
It would be the word experience, a greater than sign, and then stuff.
I feel like I saw you wearing a shirt like that.
Yeah. I think about that all the time. Yeah.
That is, I saw that and just loved it. Sorry.
Yep. Yeah. Experiences are greater than stuff. And of course, it wouldn't just be that, but then I would talk about experiences. Like, what do I mean by experiences? And it would be a deep sense of connection, of love, of gratitude. It would be about emotional experiences. Like, if you spend a bunch of money to go on a European vacation or whatever, and you're just miserable the whole time, that's not what I'm talking about. I mean, it's this cup of coffee, Sean. Oh, it's smelling it and realizing that these are beans that came from across the world. And here I am in the morning and I get to grind these beans up and I get to taste this thing. I mean, it's like that. It's like you're having experiences all the time, and it's just looking to accentuate those experiences that fit with what matters most to you.
I have to ask one more question. So what matters most to you, I think, is so important. And this next chapter of your life story, what matters the most to you so that you can be like, this next, say, 10 years was a success?
So right now, you know, professionally, it's meeting, it's trying to help as many people as possible. Like I had a business partner, so I'm on a lot of platforms and everything. And I have a lot of followers on some of them, and YouTube is a fascinating one. And I have, I don't want to say only, but I have like 15,000 on YouTube, and I put a lot of time into making YouTube videos. And I showed my business partner the other day, that I make $40 a month on YouTube, and it just doesn't, it's a labor of love. I'm super passionate about it. I will continue to make long form videos because I just want to help. I want to be the person I wish I had when I was young. That's basically what I'm trying to do, in terms of mindset. And just, I got this one comment that fueled another 3 years of videos. And by the way, I think I've made probably 3,000 videos on TikTok and everything. But this person said, "Hey, Dr. Brad, I want to let you know, I've been following you since high school. I went to college and I got a high paying degree because of one of your videos I saw that some are low paying. I just want you to know, I got my first job and I'm maxing out my 401k. And I never would have done that if I hadn't seen your content." I'm just like, all right, so I don't even, this young person is going to be a multimillionaire, and they're essentially crediting a silly video I made on TikTok 5 or 6 years ago that put a seed in this kid's brain that's like, I'm going to, and I realized that's all it takes. That's all it takes. And so I pump out content. I'm willing to make a fool of myself. I got so much ridicule for being on TikTok. I get 1,000 insults a day about my person and how I look and the fact that I'm bald, whatever. And I love it all. I love it all because I know that someone's going to hear something about boo. So that on the professional side, that's what fuels me. On the personal side, like my mission in life right now that I'm super passionate about is my boys. And I want to give them everything I can possibly give them so that they can sort of take the football. I feel like my grandpa passed it to my parents, who passed it to me, and my job is to pass it to them. And I just want to help set them up to be self-sufficient, to be good human beings, to not have some of the same hangups I had, which I don't have the same ones my parents did or my grandparents. I mean, so I feel like we're improving across the generation. I really do look at this as a multi-generational task. And so my goal is to pass on to them as much as I can before they go off into adulthood. And so that is my current most passionate project. But by the way, while modeling a loving relationship with their mother and feeling that. I didn't grow up with that. I grew up with divorced parents. And so that's something that's really, really important to me. And the easy road would just be get mad and get divorced. I mean, that's what I saw everyone do. No. And no, I'm fighting for this. And when I say fighting for it, I'm fighting my own brain. I'm not fighting with her. I love her. Why would I fight with her? I don't want to fight with her. So anyway, so that's another part of that project. And by the way, I know that's good for me too, and I know it's good for everything. But that is my passion project right now.
Thank you. I thoroughly enjoyed this, Brad, every time we talk. And I mean, what's better than that? Those two projects, some person you don't even know reaching out, say you changed my life. That's how powerful this work you're doing. And then those boys seeing you and your wife that way. Not much more important in life than that, is there?
Well, you got to make up something. And I feel like those are pretty good,
Yeah, incredible. Well, where would you tell people to follow you? You had a humble comment about some people follow you on TikTok, but I think you're over 150 million views
all together. Across platforms. Oh yeah. Views. Like, a
couple people have seen it. But where would you point people to? Of course, the book.
I would just,
where else?
The book. And I would just say their favorite platform, if they're on social media, whichever one you're on, I'm on. So I try to spread it out.
We'll link to all that. And personally, thank you for the work. I'm one of those guys on the social media reaching out saying, man, your work helped out a lot. So thank you.
I appreciate that, Sean.
Thanks for watching this week's episode. If you enjoyed the chat, please like the video, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel. We'll see you next time.